Top 10 teachings of Brachot Daf Samach Daled. We are concluding this beautiful Masechta, and we are going to be doing 10 teachings on a very small Amud of Gemara, but it is the conclusion, so it's got little special things in it. And the first one is, it's greater to host a Torah scholar than to clean up after the Ark of the Covenant. The second one is, don't force the moment. And the third one is a continuation of that, is when to know when it is the right time. When is your time? Number 4 is Sinai, like Mount Sinai, versus an uprooter of mountains, meaning brilliance versus memory. What's the proper way to go towards Torah study? Is it brilliance, or is it vast amounts of information stored in your head? Number 5 is why we all need wheat. Wheat is a metaphor for one way of learning Torah as opposed to the meat of Torah, which is another way of learning Torah. Number 6 is Chaldean astrologers and the rabbis' attitudes towards astrology. Number 7 is the famous two rabbis, Rabba Bar Nachmani, the famous Rabba, and his contemporary Rabbi Yosef, a little bit about each of their life and a story about them in this daf of Gemara. Number 8 is Yaakov, how of all of the patriarchs, Abraham and Isaac, he specifically is designated to fight the battle for the sake of his children, and the metaphor of the owner of the beam should get into the thick in the middle to carry the heavy part of the beam, the heat of the battle, why that's unique to him and not to other patriarchs. Number 9 is benefiting from a meal that a scholar is at, is like benefiting from the radiance of the Shekhinah. Number 10 is Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. Torah scholars increase peace in the world, and why that is the conclusion of our tractate. We begin with number 1. Number 1 was, it's greater to host a Torah scholar than to tidy up or clean up after the Ark of the Covenant. What exactly is that? The Gemara is a continuation of the bottom of Samach Gimel 63b. In that Gemara, a particular rabbi says that there's a logical inference, because there was a man who took care of the Aron, which meant in the sense that he would look after it, clean up around it. And because of that, his name was Obed Edom, and he had a blessing that the book of Chronicles says, I believe more than once, that he was blessed and his family was blessed. And the rabbis say that he had, in fact, 8 sons who married 8 women, and each of those women had 6 children at one time, according to our reading of the Babli. There is a Jerusalem Talmud that says they had an amount of children not by having 6 children at once, but having children again and again and again, every 2 months having another child, and what wasn't even pregnant the whole 2 months. So you could imagine, one is a miracle to have all 8 of your children have sextuplets, and the other one is Yerushalmi is even a greater miracle, to have these tiny little pregnancies and give birth to children that live and are well. So whatever that means, meaning there was a great blessing on behalf of his family because of his involvement with cleaning in front of the Ark of the Covenant. When we take care, why is it greater? Why do you get greater reward for taking care of a Torah scholar and looking after them and helping them and being a hostess for a Torah scholar? Why is that? Because Ark of the Covenant doesn't eat, it doesn't drink. A Torah scholar eats, drinks, needs to recline, needs to rest, might need to sleep, and you have to do more for a human being. So in a sense, the Talmud is telling us a very important lesson. A lot of us think of sacred places and sacred objects, and that's true, and they're very important. But understanding that the vulnerability of a person and the accomplishments of a person in spirituality, that's the ultimate work that we need to be focused on more, and that's going to be even the ultimate reward. So that's number 1, to focus not just on places and holy objects, that's also important, but to even focus on supporting and taking care of being a host. Important to be a host to anyone, but it's even greater to be able to host a Torah scholar. So that's number one. Number two is don't force the moment. The Gemara says the following. It quotes a certain rabbi, Rabbi Avin, the Levite, who said, if you push the moment pushes you back. If you let the moment, if you yield for the moment, then the moment will make way for you. And what the Gemara seems to be talking about, a good example of what it's talking about, is the story between King David and his son Avshalom. Avshalom, as you know, was very handsome and beloved by the people, but he took that as he misunderstood that, and he said, "Oh, well, people like me. I'm a good-looking guy. I'm going to rebel and try to usurp my father's crown." And he was Mored b'malchus. He rebelled against the king, his own father, and the rebellion ultimately failed, and Avshalom met a gruesome death. So that's a metaphor for us to be careful when we want to obtain power that doesn't rightfully belong to us, when it's not the right time. We try to take something at the wrong time when it belongs to someone else, at somebody else's moment. A lot of times we see a situation where there's a simcha and somebody wants to steal the spotlight from the chassan or kala and make it about them. It's like there's a certain etiquette of when you should allow yourself to be in the spotlight, and other times where you allow whoever should be highlighted to be highlighted at that time. So that is number two. Don't force the moment. There's a little bit of an explanation here that I'm going to offer in the name of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. That's in Likutei Maharan, in section 20, in the fifth, in number 5 of section 20. Rabbi Nachman explains the following. If you look at Moshe, he's an example of not failing to heed this advice when he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. That's forcing the moment. It's not just the simple reading of the text, which is he lost his patience and he should have continued to talk to the rock, even though, according to the Medrash, the rock hid and he was talking to the wrong rock. He was just talking to any other rock which wasn't responding. But it's a little more than that. It's what happened to Moses is he used power rather than prayer. And sometimes power is good and sometimes prayer is good. You have to know the difference between when one is called for and the other is not. The prayer specifically was he was supposed to connect the community in whose presence he stood before God to, no pun intended, the rock of all ages. So the rock is almost a metaphor for the Tzur Olamim, the creator of the world, who is the rock of all ages. That was his goal, was to make that connection. And it was a Sarah. It was a time of confusion and a time where people were complaining and so on and so forth. So he was supposed to be giving them the moral ability to learn from him about turning to God in difficult circumstances instead of always just complaining right away. And communicating between people and their leader is important. If a person is really a leader, they need to really listen to what the people are really in need of and represent them and bring their concerns to heaven. In other words, a leader isn't just a person who takes on a role, but they listen to who they're representing and represent them not only in front of other leaders, but mostly in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in front of God. But sometimes a leader can misunderstand the situation and rely more on their strength than their humility and on themselves rather than the people they're representing. The Gemara here can be interpreted in different ways, but the bottom line is people tend to be opportunistic and want to take advantage of a moment that they think they could get advantage of. And while it may seem that may often work, there's often a downside of taking something that you don't really have the capacity to hold on to or even truly understand. So we need the patience and the humility to get to that thing. And that leads me to number 3, which is a little bit more about this concept of when is the right time? How do you know when it's the right time? How do you know when you should ask for the promotion? Is it, do you have to be asked to take the promotion, or can you ask? That's a very good question. Can you ask for a promotion in a very crowded field where there may be other people that may be equally qualified to you? Maybe they're even more qualified, but you are eager to get ahead because you think perhaps if you have that job, you'll get a bigger salary, and whatever it is, you'll get ahead. So these are very good questions. I don't have the simple answer, but the moment usually means that there is a potential somewhere for an individual or a group, that there's a need that somebody is going to fulfill that need. So, for example, it could be a vacuum in leadership, and there's a need for somebody to step forward to volunteer to be that leader. Now, the answer is, are you really qualified to be that person? Sometimes you could be close enough. You're not fully qualified, but you're close enough that you will learn on the job. You're close enough that you will grow into that position. Other times you're fooling yourself. So the first thing you have to really be able to do is saying, are you really taking something that can be yours? Are you really taking something that's really someone else's? And you just are trying to get ahead in life and get something you don't deserve. There's plenty of the second. There's a little less of the first of learning how to grow into something that you really are the best one for and you're suited to do. So in order to really know the answer for this, it gets back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. You need to daven, and that's the teaching of the Mei Shiloach, to daven to help us understand our place in any given situation, not to be tempted into forcing the hour to try to take something that's not really yours, to ask God to help you do your own inner self-evaluation, an ethical look at yourself and the circumstances to see whether this is something that you're taking from somebody else, or this is something that you have a right to try to be a part of and take for yourself. And it could be, on the contrary, there isn't a person that doesn't have their moment. And in a place where there is no person, a man, a leader, you should be that man. You should be that leader. So knowing the difference between taking something that's not yours and rising to the occasion is a critical difference between a good leader and a power-hungry person who's taking that which shouldn't really be theirs. And knowing that difference is the difference between even the greatest person, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, once making that mistake and using power when he should have used prayer and introspection and patience. So that's number 3. And that was part of number 2. Now we go on to number 4. Sinai versus uprooters of mountains. How should we be learning Torah? Now the Gemara has a specific concept, and I'm going to learn that with you. The Gemara says the following. There's a story, an incident between Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. We're going to do the full incident in number 7, but that's the setup for number 4 as well. Rav was known as Mount Sinai, and Rabbah was known as a uprooter of mountains. What's the difference? So Rashi says that, he doesn't say it here, but he says it in, I believe, in Hurriot, in 14a in Hurriot. Rashi says, what does it mean to be Mount Sinai? Is Mount Sinai superior? And he says that is somebody, his Mishashona, Mishnah, or Brisa, Visiduron lo Kinesinatan Mehar Sinai. That's somebody who's fluent in the Mishnayos and the Brisos And it's ordered in their head as the way it was given at Sinai. In other words, you have to believe that at Sinai, the Torah that was given contained not just the written law, what we call the Tanakh, but also the oral law, what we call the Mishnayos and the Brisos. At that time, the rabbinic tradition was to remember by heart the Mishnayot, as many as you can, of the Mishnayot and the Brisot, of the Mishnah, the Brisos. And Rabbi Yosef was exemplary in his generation with memory and order, a systemic order of those things. That's the closest thing you have to a living, walking embodiment of what was revealed at Har Sinai, both in content and organization. Wow, that's a beautiful Rashi. Not in our Gemara, but it's on the same parallel. There are often Gemaras are quoted 2, 3, 4, 5 places, and or more even. So that parallel Gemara in Horiot has a Rashi that explains our Gemara as well. And is that preferred over Rabbah's way of analytical learning? He was a grinder up of mountains, which means you give him an idea, you put something in front of him, and he could destroy it with, he could like a way you can grind up a mountain with heavy machinery. His mind was so sharp, he could destroy anything you put in front of him with his analysis. But there's a joke where somebody who was learning Torah his whole life, he comes to the world of truth, and he's before the heavenly tribunal, and they say, look, you were learning, you're in kollel your whole life, you're learning top kollel, top chabura. Can you give a shir? Can you give a lecture? And based on the lecture, we'll assess your accomplishments, and we'll give you your right placement in the right base medrash and Gan Eden, the right study hall in the world to come. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. They're like, so how are we going to assess? He says, better that God should give the shir, and I'll slug him up. I'll have a chance to show how I can, challenge him with hard questions. It's a joke, meaning that there's some people that's the way they learn. They learn is to like be able to ask questions and challenge everyone. So, no joking aside, Rabbah Bar Nachmani, that was his specialty. His specialty wasn't just to put people down, but he was analytical. So he wasn't so much known. Rashi says about that style within Rabbah of Oker Harim, that the uprooter of mountains, the Charif, that he was sharp, Umefalpel b'Torah, and he was more pilpulistic. He would he'd go back and forth in analysis of Torah. Although the order or the memory and the order of exactly what it says in this Mishnah, what it says in that Brisa, it's not so strong in him. It's not that he didn't know anything. He had quite a bit of information in his head, but not clearly on the same level of Rabbi Yosef. So that's the Gemara is saying. Which one is greater? And it's not just a question in that time. It was a question of leadership. There was a need because the head of the yeshiva had passed on, and the leader of that generation of rabbis in Babylonia needed a new leader. There was a need. Who's going to be the next great rabbi? But it's also a question for us. What's our method? Should we be focused on learning as much as we can and memorizing them as much as we can? Or should we be focused on analyzing and understanding? And the truth is, some people are better than others. There's a group of Jews called the Shasian, and they know the entire Talmud by heart. And it's heartfelt to watch them in action and see them be able to respond to questions on the entirety of the Talmud. On the other hand, there's also a great need for people to be able to explain things. There's not enough people who can take Torah and explain it to other people, who understand it, who analyzed it, and thought it through every angle. And for example, the Brisker Darach, which takes various Gemaras and then aligns them and explains Elishitaso, explains how various different Gemaras are all aligned internally, what the logic is behind them. That's also very important. That really speaks to our generation who's looking for understanding. Now everybody has to find their balance in Torah, whether processing a vast amount of information and remembering it. Also, there's a concept of rogue Thomas Machuyas. If you don't process a lot of information, you may come up with interesting ideas, but they're not really like integrated with other parts of the Talmud because you don't know them, because you're ignorant of them. Okay? So that's a good question, and that's the answer is for some people should probably be studying less and thinking more, and other people should be studying more and thinking less, meaning because they're very creative. I see some people super creative, but they don't know enough yet to be so creative because they don't have the Masorah. They don't really understand the tradition. Oh, so it's a balance, and not everybody is the same. Not everybody is expected to know Shas by heart, and probably would be better off not wasting that. I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but they would be better suited to understanding things better based on your mindset, based on how you are built. So for somebody like me to try to master Shas would be a waste of my time because my memory is so bad. And I know myself, I got to know my skills. And if I tried to do that, I would waste my time. I wouldn't amount to anything. I wouldn't be able to remember that much anyway. So it'd be a waste of my time. But for me to try to understand things, I'm not saying I'm brilliant, but to analyze things is easier for me than to remember things. So I have to spend more time doing that, and to figure out our own avoda in that area. That's number 4. Now we go to number 5, which is the Gemara says that they were looking for a new head of the yeshiva, to have the based in, to be a leader, to be essentially the equivalent of like a king. And they said we need to head the academy in Babylonia, and they decided they would ask the rabbis in Israel which is preferable. The Mount Sinai person, Rabbi Yosef, who knew so much Mishnayot and Brachot, or the uprooter of mountains, the analysis that Rabbah represented. And the rabbis responded to their query and said, better the Mount Sinai person. That's what should be preferred because we all need wheat. What does that mean? We all need wheat. What does wheat have to do with Mount Sinai? So the answer is that wheat is a staple, especially when they didn't have refrigeration. Meat and vegetables would go bad very quickly. Wheat could be stored for a very, very, very long time. So therefore, people relied on wheat to make bread and pastas and porridge. And meat you had when you were, lucky enough. You had it once a week or once a month, or chicken, but it wasn't a staple of the diet. So it's not. So it could be that a shear that's given by a brilliant person will be more mind blowing, but less consistent. Therefore, they initially approached Rabbi Yosef to become the Rosh Hashiva, and we'll learn very soon that he turned them down and why he turned them down. But let's focus for one moment on why wheat is so important in halacha. Because it could be argued that even though I just gave a whole thing about me personally, I'd rather do a little more analysis. I don't do enough analysis, and I spend too much time doing things like Daf Yomi, and I should really do less of that and more more contemplative thinking about what the Gemara is really talking about. But there is a problem with people who, let's say, like the Brisker Derech too much, is that often, because you see everything conceptually, it's hard to always translate that into halacha lemaisa. Like it's hard to be a brisker and to also be a posik, a really authoritative halachic a decisor. The people who try to do both of them often end up doing less brisk and ultimately more focus on halacha. But usually, for example, in the Torah of Rav Moshe Feinstein, you don't see so much this pronounced brisker derech in his learning, and that's why he's able to focus on the halacha lemaisa. And in terms of halacha, it's a much more beautiful system that comes out of not having to. He's very much able to add very deep and so on, but it doesn't have that over analysis. It relies on knowing the entire Torah, and in the knowledge of the entire Torah, being able to, I don't want to use the word, God forbid, manipulate, but to be able to understand things, to come to halachic conclusion that allows for us to use halacha in a beautiful way, which is really God revealing himself through halacha. And you see that in the work of Rav Moshe Feinstein. So that might be why we all need the bekias of Kol Torah Kula that doesn't get hindered by the sharpness of a Rosh Hashiva. Is too busy to give a shear with all of the different opinions of how to learn Rashi, with no actual conclusion of what to do Lamaisa. So that's what number 5 is. Now we get to number 6, and number 6 is when they came. It's about astrology, about the Chaldeans, and whether or not we listen or bother listening to what astrologers have to say. And that's part of the story. So the story is as follows. When they said, Rabbi Yosef, please accept this job. We want you to be the head of the community. We want you to be the head of the Beis Din. We want you to be the head of the yeshiva. We want you to be our leader. And he said, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it. Why? Because he had been taught by the Chaldeans, which is another word for astrologers, that you will ultimately head the academy, but only for 2 years. You can only survive for 2 years. So what he did is he said, no, I'm not ready to be the head of the academy. He let his contemporary Rabbi Bar Nachmani assume the position. Rabbi was the head of the academy for 20 years, actually 22 years, which would have made him 18 or 19 when he took the job, because he supposedly passed on at 40. When he passed away 22 years later, Rav Yosef assumed the position of leadership for 2 years. So he said, because I didn't push to take the job right away, I managed to live 20 extra years, because I knew from this astrology that I was only meant to live 2 years once I accepted that position. So by deferring my moment, by not pushing ahead of my colleague, I ended up benefiting and living an extra 20 years. So that's what the Gemara says. But there's a very big problem with that. Do Jews go to astrologers? Should one go to astrologers? And the answer is no. Now, question, now why do I say that? And the answer is that it is a Gemara. There's a debate. I shouldn't just say no. There's a debate in the Gemara. If you look in Psachim 113b, there it seems to say that Amar Rav Bar Chana, Amar Rab Shmuel, Bar Marta, Amar Rav Mishum Rab Yossi. Okay, it's got to be all these rabbis in the name of Rabbi Yossi. It's got to be, it's not Rab Yosef, it's another rabbi. They say, Rabbi Yossi Ish Hutzal, Menayin she'ein sholim b'kaldim. How do we know that you can't ask advice or insight from an astrologer? Shenemar tamim tia im Hashem elokecha, because it says be tamim, be complete or whole with the Lord your God. Okay, well that's pretty strong. We know the Ramban, Nachmanides, actually says that Maimonides should have counted that in one of his 613 mitzvot. So it's understood to be the halacha, to be the law. And by the way, I think Maimonides, although he didn't count it, probably would agree. I mean, if anybody would agree that you shouldn't go to astrologers, it would be Maimonides. And Nachmanides is saying it should have been counted as an actual one of the 613 mitzvot. So how could Rav Yosef, this great leader, go to astrologers? Now, I don't know if this is a good answer or not, but I was thinking that possibly you could say that usually, if you act upon what an astrologer tells you, it would be prohibited because you are not trusting in God to tell you to do the right thing. When you just trust in God, that would be the right thing. But here, he was doing the opposite of what human nature is. Human nature is if you're approached to be, there's two equal people. They had to choose between one. They didn't even know. So they asked some other rabbis, and the rabbis just gave an answer without really knowing exactly who the two personalities were necessarily in person, or maybe they did. I don't know. Most people would run at the opportunity when asked to take a leadership position because the power and the prestige and the honor and all of those things. Rabbi Yosef would only rely on astrologers for humility to hold himself back from assuming a position of leadership. If it would be the opposite, if they would be like, go, take it, then maybe he wouldn't listen to them because he'd be maybe taking something that really doesn't belong to him. So it's really, the Gemara isn't trying to say listen to astrologers. The Gemara is saying be patient, your time will still come and you won't lose out because of it. So that's my answer. I don't know if it's a good answer. But it could be also that in the time of the Gemara, it was an open debate about whether or not you were allowed to ever listen to astrologers or not. And eventually the debate was settled, and you can't. The answer is at this point, we don't go to astrologers. If you ever do, it has to be just for, like, as they say, entertainment purposes. It can't be anything that you would want to actually listen to, because that's a prohibition of seeking out and by the way, certain soothsayers are prohibited in the Torah. So you'd also, besides for astrology, there are specific instances where the Torah very specifically says these things are forbidden. That's number 6. Now we took to number 7, and number 7 says the following. Rabbi Yosef and Rabbah, two great leaders. So let's who are these two people? They both were fit to be the head of their respective community that of Bavel. They ended up both having one a longer term, 22 years for Rabbah, and Rabbi Yosef for 2 years. So who are these great Torah persons? We're not going to do exhaustive review of who they were, but when it's time to just talk a little bit about them. So let's start with Rabbi Yosef, who is really the reason why the Gemara here brings up the story, because he didn't grab the moment and things worked out for him because of that. Rabbi Yosef was also known as Rabbi Yosef, the son of Chia. His father's name was Chia. He was blind, so he didn't have it so easy. And here the Gemara says that when that whole period of the 22 years that he was basically in waiting. So it's, by the way, it's also an uncomfortable position because you're equal. If I remember another Gemara, is that he didn't go in, he may not have gone into the study hall at that time. I don't know if that's the same person, but I'll look it up later. It's an uncomfortable position. And then there are other people that might say, hey, this guy should have been the chief rabbi, and that could create problems. So he was very modest. He wanted to make sure nobody would do that. So he never did anything that would show that he had any leadership position or quality or potential. He basically downplayed himself. So they're like let's say something that a leader would do would be like to get somebody to come and give you a haircut in your house rather than go to the barber shop. He never would do that. Or the equivalent of that, they would the bloodletter, that would come to you, but he wouldn't let the bloodletter come to you. He'd go to them to show that he's just a regular guy. He's not special. He's not a leader in any way. And that's, of course, he really was a great leader, and that would reveal itself when he took the position 22 years later. But for those 22 years, total humility and beautiful show that he was patient and waiting. Now, there's a couple things. There's a Gemara that says that he would celebrate on the time of the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah, which is Shavuos, with taking a third-born calf. The third-born calf is known to be exceptionally delicious, but it also is a representation of three things, right? Because it's the light of the Torah has the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, and the three parts of the Torah. That was given to three people, Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, and also was given on the third month, the month of Sivan. So there's a symbolic significance of the third-born calf, and he would say, "Ilav hayom kagarim." If not for this day that caused a shift in the universe, the day of the giving of the Torah, Kami Yosef Ika B'Shuka. How many Josephs there would be in the marketplace? Remember, the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to talk about that even if you did spiritual things, it would remain in the marketplace. It wouldn't transform you. It wouldn't transform who you are, because you'd be enemitzivabosa. You'd be doing something without being commanded it. And the Torah is that which brings the divine will into the actual physical world. Dear B'dachtanim. Okay, that was the Rebbe's teaching, but I want to add on a little bit to that teaching and say something else. I'd like to say, with total humility, because the Rebbe's teaching is definitely way million times better. But what he could have also been referring to is Ilav Hayoma. If not for knowing the day, if not being aware of time and when's your right time, the Kagarim, that causes everything. It caused the Torah to be given. It also, in my life, when that day came, I said, not yet. Right? And if you don't recognize what God has for you today, or not today, it'll be tomorrow, like what God really has in plan for you. So then you're just in the marketplace. Even your, so to speak, elevated status is just something you took that doesn't really belong to you. So you have to understand the meaning of when it's your time and when it's not your time. Okay, so that's a little bit about Rav Yosef. I have more to say about him, but that's what's relevant for this teaching. And then Rabbah, who's also known as Rabbah, the son of Nachmani, ended up becoming a super popular head of the yeshiva in Babel, with 12,000 students studying with him every Elul and every Adar, leading up to the holidays. And he was known for his brilliance, as we said before, and unfortunately he died at 40, which is a little bit of a tragedy. He is a descendant of Eli, and the descendants of Eli, with some exceptions, tended to die a little younger. Abaya, his nephew, lived to 60. Gemara talks about that as well. So that's a little bit about Rav Yosef and a little bit of Rabba. That's number 7. And now number 8 is the Gemara says the following thing. The Gemara says that, what's the meaning of the verse that says, Yancha Hashem b'yom tzari yisagevcha Hashem elokei Yaakov. May God answer you in your day of distress, and may the name of God of Jacob give you strength. Why Jacob? Why is it Jacob's God that should answer your prayers? What about Isaac? What about Abraham? So from here we learn, and again, this is another teaching from Avin Bar Levi, that whoever is the owner of a beam should go under the heavy part of the beam to carry the beam. So what are we talking about here? So what is this metaphor? So the answer is given in Rashi. And then we'll take it from there. Let's keep it following. Rashi says, "In both tatla b'makom l'makom." If you're coming to carry a beam, you got to take it from place A to B. So then, lases binyan. You're taking it to point B to put it in a building, to make it part of a building. Kolomar. What that means to say is what's relevant. Yaakov shekol habanim shelo. V'torach v'gdilam Yavaka Shalem Rachman. Yaakov had the Shvatim, the Shiftei Ka. He had the tribes, all of the sons of Israel. And he not only had them, it's not just the biological father, he broke himself. He worked very hard to raise them, and it was very stressful. He's the one of all of the Avot who should ask for mercy, should daven on their behalf. So that's how Rashi explains it. It's a beautiful Rashi. But let's go a little bit deeper. The Ben Yehoyada talks about, well, what about Abraham? What about Isaac? And he says the simple idea is that Abraham and Isaac represent Chesed and Gvura. That they represent the sides, like the branches of the tree, the hands of the tree. Like in the body, Chesed is the right hand, Gvura is the left hand, and the trunk, the body itself, is Tiferet, is the center. Jacob represents the center. But then he goes a little further. So you can't rely on just unconditional love that Abraham represents or the strict justice that Isaac represents. You have to rely on the tiferet, the harmony, the balance between, which is mercy, somewhat between unconditional love and unconditional judgment, to create the mainstay of what will sustain us. But then he goes a little further and he says, also, look, Abraham represents the Abrahamic religions. He represents the father of Christianity and Islam. Isaac also represents the father of Rome, so to speak, through Esau. It's only Jacob that he represents Klal Yisrael. He represents specifically Israel. So in a sense that sometimes we need, our problems stem from our cousins in the world. And we need Jacob. We need Abraham is like, okay, like you're both my descendants, and I'm not going to get involved. And it's only Jacob that is going to get involved. So we mamish have to say, Jacob, it's your descendants. We need him to get involved. So that's number 8. Number 9 is on the importance of being present when Torah scholars are benefiting from a Suda. That if you are part of a meal, if you're part of a dinner or lunch where Torah scholars are being served and are being taken care of, just being there is like you are benefiting from the Ziv Hashchina, from the radiance of the divine presence. Now, what exactly does that mean? So we'll say the following. There's a Gemara in Yerushalmi, in Eruvin 5:1, that talks about the importance just of being in the presence of a Torah teacher. That even if you don't learn anything, even if they say, a lot of people, they say, well, my teacher is giving a basic shiur today and I need an advanced shiur. No, go to the teacher, be in their presence, because you're going to get something just from being in their presence. You want to get even more, then serve them, take care of them, attend to something that could benefit them. And of course, feeding them, and so on and so forth, is considered a wonderful thing. And that's a continuation of what the first teaching that we already did. But even being part of it is very special. Now, let's talk about eating and the table. Because eating and the table that you're a part of is really similar to an altar. What was the point of an altar? They would sacrifice an animal. An animal represents your animal capacity to want pleasure for its own sake, even if it hurts somebody else or is selfish and self-indulgent and not well with your soul. And by taking that animal and instead of indulging in it, you offer it as an offering and bring it up and are makriv it, so to speak, on the mizbeach, put it on the altar, and have the heavenly fire that comes down together with the earthly fire that you bring, that the Kohanim would do on their own. What that represents is taking your physical body and the physical possessions that could take you away from God and transforming them into holy deeds and holy moments and holy acts. So our capacity to transform some aspect of our physical self into something that's satisfying God is accomplish when we enjoy one another's company with people that exemplify God because of their knowledge and their dedication to the Torah scholars. And having a Suda, having a festive meal with them, or any meal with them for that matter, allows for this transformation to happen. The Torah learning is deeper than words because it imbues everything about the people that partake in the food and the vessels and the company. The table itself, the wine itself, is a transformative experience. That's what the Gemara Brachot is all about. That's why the expression that's used in the Gemara is whoever benefits, meaning they're benefiting not just from the food, but being part of something that a Torah scholar is in its midst. Sharui is from the same language of Hashra'at Hashchina, the presence of the divine, like being present, resting, being somewhere. So by being in that place where the Torah scholar really is comfortable and reveals themselves on a Torah scholar reveals sometimes more about themselves in that setting than even in the yeshiva. Because it transforms the more of themselves, not just their head, but also their heart, also their body. And that's why it's like the Ziv HaShechina. And I'll just say one thing here. I saw one of the commentaries say that the Ziv HaShechina is non-physical, and really the Talmud Chacham, you should know, isn't really caring about the physical world. The Talmud Chacham is present in the physical world, but his objective is to transform the physical world, not by transforming it, but by leaving it, by recognizing its worthlessness. And I actually, and it was a great rabbi that saw it, that said that, one of the great commentaries. But I couldn't help but think to myself that maybe, what if it was just the opposite? What if it's not just by leaving the physical world, but it's taking the physical world itself and transforming it? The Hashrat Hashchina isn't just saying, I want no part in the physical world, but it's saying, I want the physical world itself. All of my body and all of the things that I'm engaged with should call out and say, how great are you, God? So that could be the meaning of what this is saying. Okay, now we come to the final 10th teaching, which is Amar Reb Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Talmidei Chachamim ein lahem menucha lo b'olam hazeh v'lo b'olam haba. Torah scholars don't have rest, not in this world, not in the next world. And then Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. Torah scholars increase the peace, make more peace in this world. Shenamar v'chol banayich limudei Hashem v'rav shalom banayich. Like it says, your sons are studied in divineness, and there's much peace between your children. Don't read it as children or sons, but as builders. Torah scholars build up the world, and we need, a broken world is unbuilt or broken, and a built world is peaceful. Lots of peace to the lovers of Torah, and there's no obstacle in front of them. Let there be peace, etc. So we see the value of peace and the creation of peace. Why is this the conclusion of Masechtas Brachos? There is a Chidushay Agadot that says the following. He says the following. He says the whole point of this Masechta is that it's rabbinic for the most part. Not all of it. There's some biblical things like reading of the Shema and Berchas, the bracha after we eat bread, brachas hamazon. But the rest of it, for the most part, not all of it, but is many rabbinic mitzvahs. The mitzvah of prayer may have a a biblical element to it, but there's definitely many rabbinic aspects to it. Birchas hanenin, blessings over food, and any other benefits and brachos in general. What the ending of the Masechta is alluding to, according to the Chedushei Agadot, is what's the point of all of this? The point is to make peace in the world. The point is to get us in a relationship with God so that we build the world, so that we transform the physical, so that we become better people, so that we bring the Shekhinah into the actual world, so that we take the bread that we earn that could be seen as warfare and just existence and subsistence, and to transform it into Sudas Mitzvah, into holiness. So we take the wine and we recognize how we could use wine for many mitzvot. So that's the point, is to increase peace. The rabbis are increasing the relationship with one man, and the Chedushei Agadot is emphasizing God and man, or women and God, and men and women and God. But I'd like to say that there's no reason that doesn't include man and man and men and women, for there to be that the brachot should create a new awareness of one another, so that we go from solitary people enjoying individual pursuits to transforming things through birchat hamitzvot, through blessing things that are holy, and tefillot, davening, and even other brachot and birchat hanenin, where we don't always include one another, but we learn how and when to transform the physical world so that we make peace with each other. Mazel tov on the completion of the Masechtas Brachos.